Hello everyone, all the attendees at the International Token Web Conference. My name is Gary Oddy. I'm here in England at the moment, and I'm going to talk to you about a particular series of tokens that was issued here between about 1880 and the 1970s, and these are farm checks of the fens. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, hopefully when the technology works. And here it is. So this is the title of the talk, Farm Checks of the Fens. So here's the outline and the usual series of questions you get when you've got any large series of tokens. Where did they come from? When were they used? What do the tokens look like? Probably the more interesting part of it. Why were the tokens used here in this particular area? Who was using them and how were the tokens being used? So here are the fens. This is the United Kingdom with a bit of Ireland, and the fens is a very low-lying piece of land to the east of the country, which borders onto an area of water called the Wash, and this is the North Sea. And at the end of the last ice age, before the ice melted, this was a piece of relatively high land. When the sea levels rose, all of the rivers in this area backed up, and the whole area became a huge area of swampland, quite tidal. And as the centuries, millennia passed, then moss built up, and the whole area became a very large bogland. And so various attempts have been made to try and drain it. The Romans had tried certain areas, but it really didn't start to happen until the 17th century when the Dutch engineers came over, including the famous Cornelius Vermuyden, in 1642. And this is his map of the area at the time. So this little area at the top is the Wash, which leads out into the North Sea. The darker area is tidal, and you can see various, when it's a straight line, it's man-made, various drains that had already existed, but the area that's lightly shaded is very, very marshy land. So in the 1600s, this was a very unpleasant area to be, very, very poor agriculture, very low population, infested with mosquitoes. And by the time they'd finished in the late 19th, early 20th century, the whole area was crisscrossed with ditches and dikes and pumping stations, etc., etc. So this is the process of the draining of the fens. In order to drain the fens, as well as putting in ditches, you need to pump out the water from the lowest lying land. Much of this land is only 5 or 6 meters above sea level, so still prone to flooding at extreme tides. And this is the Lakenheath Old Lode. A lode is a ditch or a dike or a drainage feature. And the early technology was a windmill with a scoop wheel, and you can still just see the scoop wheel in there. This photographs from the 1920s, 1930s. And the windmill was replaced by a steam engine, which was driving a pump, and that was replaced by a diesel engine and a pump in the 1920s. So everything's becoming more compact and more efficient. And these days, all of these drains are emptied using electrical pumps and turbine devices driven by electric motors. All right, so once you've got the land drained, it turns into extremely fertile soil. There's several meters of peaty soil there, excellent for growing fruit crops and arable crops. And nothing much really happened until the 1840s when the railways were installed, and including a dedicated tramway between various areas of this drained land. Most of it is centered around Wisbech, and during the harvest season, many people came up. So once the trains had been installed, and that gave it good access to London, the markets there for fruit and veg, and also to the Midlands, Birmingham, Nottingham, etc. Lots and lots of workers came out from London, and this was their holiday. They got paid for picking fruit. So you get a holiday in the countryside, you get lots of fresh air, you get some exercise, and you get paid for it. What could be better? And so huge numbers, thousands of people came from the East End of London on the trains, and were picked up at the station and taken back to various camps. And here we have a truck owned by Ayres and Son Limited, who had a farm at Elm, well, a large area of land around Elm, which is very close to Wisbech. No health and safety those days. Everybody could just hang on and try not to fall off. The people were housed in camps or caravans or barns, depending on the size of the farm. But there was a huge agricultural camp at Friday Bridge, and this was based on a World War II internment camp. So it had been tidied up a little bit, and obviously the internees had gone. And here we have the first sighting of two tokens. We have a quite worn Ayres and Sons of Wisbech 1 penny token, and actually at Friday Bridge itself. So there are many, many places that issue tokens, and each farmer has his name, his token, and his denomination. This is from Loggins, CA Loggins, based at Friday Bridge. And moving on to the next one. This is the Friday Bridge Agricultural Camp, as I said. Previously a internment camp, and you can tell by the almost military layout. So the barbed wire fences have gone, but many hundreds of people would be staying in this camp and then go out to the local farms to pick the crops. Depending on which crops and what time of the season it was, you ended up with my workers moving from one farm to the next, keeping up with the crops. There's a large number of tokens known from this area, over 2,500 now. A proportion of them are in metal, but the vast majority are in paper. The metal ones date from the sort of 1880s to 1960s, and the paper ones are from sort of the 1920s and 30s up till decimalisation, 1971. So we have decimal denominated tokens in pounds and pence instead of pounds, shillings and pence. Here are some of the card tokens, and they're not exactly very inspiring designs, but we have a name, a place, or the name of the farm, and a denomination. And you end up with metal rimmed card, quite thin card, or quite chunky, thicker card tokens. And some of them give a little bit more information. Fruit grower was George C. Four Goats is an area where his farm was, which is close to Tibbs. So this is almost his complete address. I've managed to find two photographs showing the tokens in use. The first one is quite staged. Everybody's smiling for the camera, but in the left-hand side of this image is a wooden box with 8 compartments in it, and each of these compartments would have a set of tokens. I think CFF is the Cambridge Fruit Farms Limited, and they were quite a big landowner, so several farmers were in sort of a conglomerate working for Cambridge Fruit Farms. And we have the people lining up, weighing their fruit and veg in their chips, which is a sort of basket, or wicker baskets, or cardboard boxes, whatever they were picking their fruit into. And that's about 1935. I've also managed to find a British Pathé video from 1962, which if you zoom in, it's only on for a few seconds in the middle of this video, and I'll leave a link in the notes that I give with this talk. It's about 1 minute 20 seconds. It shows the farmer with a box of tokens between his knees at the weighing station, and I think these are gooseberries that are being picked, and that's a machine for pulling the little stalks off gooseberries before they're put into the main box. There's one of the baskets for picking the fruit into, and one frame at the end of this film shows the farmer reaching into the box where bags of tokens are kept, and he's handing out the appropriate amount of money to the person for the weighed fruit. So the distribution of the tokens. So another early map from Blau in 1638, again similar to the Vermuyden map. We've got the wash, the tidal area, and the drained area. And what we find is that if you plot a map, it's not a very good one, sorry about that, with a red dot for every token issuing location, we find that almost all of the token issuing farm addresses are actually on the slightly higher ground. Obviously, you don't want to be flooded, but the population in these areas is very small where it's painted blue, because that was the boggiest, nastiest piece of land before it was drained. It's still very low lying and can still be quite easily flooded when we have extreme rain or very, very high tides. And even these that appear to be on the lower lying ground are actually on slightly raised areas of ground. In much the same way that we have Ely is known as the Isle of Ely. It was an island in the middle of the fens in its time. So I've been collecting and accumulating data about these for about 20 years. And this is just one page of a 30-page catalogue in quite small print, where we have the name of the place, the name of the issuer as it appears on the token, and a little bit of extra information that I've managed to find from directories or telephone directories, etc. And this is the first section of the Wisbech page, starting at A for Ambrose, finishing for C, Cockett. Wisbech has a few hundred issuers, and they maybe have an address in Wisbech, but they have farms in the local area. So looking at a few statistics of the tokens, on the vertical axis we have the number of issuers, and on the horizontal axis we have the number of different tokens known for each of those issuers. So typically we have 5 or 6 tokens per issuer. That's a reasonable middling number, different denominations. And what we have so far is 2,848 different tokens from 679 different issuers, and I think there's 96 different addresses or different place names on these tokens. 207 of the issuers are known from a single token, usually one denomination. There might be a few known of that particular one, but it's still a scarce thing. So this just gives an idea that if these 207 issuers should have had 4 or 5 denominations, we've still got another several hundred tokens to find. So there's a long way to go before we have a complete catalogue. And the extreme case here is DC Titmarsh at Outwell, who has 27 different tokens. Some of these are pre-decimal, some of them are post-decimal, and I suspect they were not used concurrently, but that's more than enough for any token issuer. So hoards have been found of these tokens in their original boxes. So this is the hoard of a farmer called Shinkins, who was at 3 Holes, which is again in the Fens. And what we've got is a wooden box with compartments, and each compartment has various tokens in it. Obviously, this was last used in the 1960s and 1970s, so things will have been moved around a bit. Many tokens will probably have gone missing. But what's nice about this box, it still has its original lookup sheet for how many pence you should pay. So if you've got, for example, 3 pounds of fruit in one chip or basket, then you should get, I think that's 14.5 pence. So this is new pence, it's just gone decimal. We're still using half pences, etc. All the way up to 43 pounds in 8 chips, and you will get £2.90 for your work, and that would take quite a few hours to work. But people worked in groups and collected the tokens up. So the tokens saved the farmer having to have a large amount of small change, and at the end of the week the farmer would then ask the workers to come in and cash in their tokens for proper money, banknotes and coins. This also gave the advantage that if you lost some of your tokens, which leads to the metal detector fines that we sometimes get today, the farmer managed to keep some of the money as well. So several hoards have been found. I've managed to analyse 11 of them, which included 5,400 tokens. So hoards, each one is from a particular farmer in its original wooden box. And my estimate from this is that each farmer would order between 50 and 100 of each denomination for his use on his farm. And really there'd be a maximum of around 200 and 300 used, ordered for each denomination. And that would require a bigger box. And some of these boxes are quite large, and this one would hold probably 100 or 2 in each of these compartments, especially of the small metal ones. I haven't found a hoard yet of metal tokens in its original box. The surviving hoards are cardboard tokens in wooden boxes. Most of the metal hoards probably ended up in the scrap many, many years ago. The cardboard tokens, it rains on them, they turn to mush, or they'll have been composted or burnt. They're quite rare survivors, the original boxes, and most of them that I've got are full of woodworm. So they come with their own life forms. So the tokens, the vast majority of them have no indication as to who manufactured them. However, a few include in very small print the name of the manufacturer, and this is Burrell Brothers of Wisbech. And these started off as a tea dealer and grocer in the high street in the 1880s, And then they diversified into making labels and fasteners and anything small and stamped metal. And their address moved around, and managed to get a postcard of St. Neots town, not St. Neots, Wisbech town centre, which shows their shopfront. And Burrell Brothers is written across there. Other manufacturers that are known from Wisbech are Poyser, who was a printers, and their name appears in very small print on a few of the metal-rimmed thin card token. Others were issued by or manufactured by Ardell of Leeds, Bolton of Birmingham, Neil and London. These are really the three big manufacturers of metal tokens in Britain in the late 19th, early 20th century, up to the middle of the 20th century. So, of the 2,700 tokens, I've researched quite a few and gone into the background of the families, the businesses, etc. But one that sort of stood out was John Gilroy and Sons of Wisbech Limited. And there's a single token known of them at the moment, and it says John Gilroy and Sons, Wisbech Limited. But it also says King's Cross and Covent Garden. And these are two of the big London fruit and vegetable markets. So he was worth looking into because he seems to have multiple addresses. So I managed to trace the family back to Northumberland, where it was again started off as a grocer and tea dealer, and slowly became a potato warehouseman, a fruit and large-scale vegetable wholesaler. So these were working on the docks and auctioning and buying and selling fruit and vegetables. They started off in the north of England, and then slowly, in about the beginning of the 20th century, moved to the south, got an address in Wisbech and started to work from there. And then they had contacts in the markets in London. This token is probably not used on a farm, which is unfortunate. I suspect it's a receipt for a basket or a crate for carrying fruit in and around the London markets. Quite famously, one of the directors of this company in 1966 received an OBE, Order of the British Empire, for services to the fruit and veg industry, which I thought was quite neat. So quite a sort of big mover and shaker in the local businesses of fruit and vegetable. So there we are, rapidly at the end. I've covered the who, where, when, why, and how. And I'd like to do a few quick acknowledgements. Past attendees at the Token Congress in England, in Britain, and the readers of the Token Corresponding Society Bulletin who've provided information over the years. Some of them are listed below, others I say thank you anyway. A special thank you to Dick Pentelow, who was a potato dealer and collected these tokens for about 30 years. And he let me have access to his collection, which allowed several hundred new varieties to be listed. Because he was working locally, he knew the farmers. I showed him a photograph once, and he said, "I married that farmer's daughter," etc. He was truly local. And several other collectors, Duncan, Jim, and writers like H.C. Darby, long since deceased, but excellent piece of work, and other people from whom information has been got. Hopefully at some point this will become a book, a catalogue, and will appear as short articles in the TCSB, the Token Corresponding Society Bulletin. And at that point I will stop sharing. Magically I should reappear, and then we will carry on with questions if anybody has any. So thank you very much for listening, and I will say goodbye.